Great. Thanks, Mariah. Thanks, everyone, for joining us today. I think Mariah is going to keep us on mute or the guests on mute until the end, where we could open it up for some Q&A. I have a lot of material to go through, so I hope that we can get to a point where we can ask questions and still keep you in under an hour. So I'll get started. Let me just move through the slides here. I put together a quick agenda, so welcome. I'm going to provide a little bit of background. We'll talk about some of the events that the major events that MJA was involved in this past year on the legislative front, and then we'll get to the ballot initiative finally at the end and talk about where we're at today. So, as a way of background, maybe some folks know this, maybe you don't, but there are a lot of people incarcerated, and the U.S. leads this statistic, unfortunately, as we look at incarceration rates and we look at the total numbers. I'm going to skip right through that and talk about what we have done in the past. So I'll spend a little more time on this slide. The good time bill history. So this is the legislative route. Starting with truth in sentencing, you can see at the bottom left, which kind of became widespread and covered all those being incarcerated from that point on. Started in 2000 for everyone, and a few years later, 10 years, 9 years later, one legislator from the UP tried to restore good time. That was George Cushionberry. And then in 2018, another 9 years later, Martin Howerlich and Rep. David LeGrand introduced a bill package to also try and restore the good time bill language. And then when we joined the fight in 2020, we were working with our local senator, Jeff Irwin, and he introduced a bill, sole sponsor on the bill in 2020, which was, again, the same language that historically had been introduced. It was the language that harkened back to the good time policy that was in place in 1978 and prior. After working on this for almost a year, we revamped the language to make it what it is today that we've been introducing now. This is the fourth time, or three times rather, for the new language. It is the 30 days credit for 30 days served. That's how I describe it. And this gives you a short history of the bills that introduced that language, starting with 2021 when Senator Irwin led the charge again for us, and five other friends in the Senate joined him. Then in 2022, House Representative Amos O'Neill and some others introduced the same package for us. That was quite a surprise, and it kind of kick-started the topic again for the beginning of 2023. In 2023, we started the charge early, and I'll get into some of the activities that we did that led up to the introduction of the bill package that now sits in the House Criminal Justice Committee. It's House Bill 4468 through 4471. And this is a list of all those representatives that had signed on in the 2023 introduction in April. So this is a nice little summary of the legislative approach that we've been taking. For those who aren't familiar, I'll quickly breeze through what the policy points are of this good time bill package that we had introduced starting in 2021. Again, I said it's a 30-day credit for 30 days served. To dive into that a little bit further, tied to the third point over here, which was class one or major misconducts. The only way you can earn that 30-day credit would be to not have any class one or major misconducts. And it would only affect that 30-day period. What we wanted this to be was a wide spread offering for anybody who was serving time in a Michigan prison. That means it doesn't matter what the charge was. We don't have any carve outs. So anybody with a sentence that starts with a number, that is not a life sentence, can be eligible for this policy. And then the fourth point, way over to the right, is that we want this policy to be applied retroactively. It's not super clear from the language when you read the bills, but in fact, there's indications by virtue of language that states a person's early release date will be recalculated. So that means those who are already serving time would have their time, their early release date adjusted. So those are the four the bill language that we have introduced now three times. In order to get to the whole
Uh,
legislative.
Jack, just to go back for a moment, I don't know if you talk about this in the future. No previous slide before this. Um, the legislative sessions and how those timings work, and how we currently are only in the middle of a legislative session.
Oh, sure. So the legislative session that we first jumped in on in 2020 was the tail end of a 2-year legislative session, 2019, 2020. So that's what they call the lame duck time. This was introduced in December of 2020, Senate Bill 1240 through 1243. 2021 started the new legislative session for those 2 years. And that ended with the election that we just experienced in November of last year, which, crying out loud, it's more than a year now. Okay. So this legislative session from 21 is over, and the new legislators came in at the beginning of 2023. They have 2 years to do their jobs, 2023 and 2024. So they could get stuff done right up until December of 2024. Is that the point you wanted me to make?
Well, yes, so that the bill that was introduced in April this year is still live, even though they have finished legislative work for 2023. We do not have to reintroduce this specific bill that was introduced in April next year. That session still exists, and they still could have hearings, and it could be introduced on the Senate side and move forward all as part of this current legislative session.
Correct. So, in order to start the legislators thinking about reintroducing the bill, way back in February of this year, we decided we would initiate a legislative lunch and learn with the idea that we wanted to reignite the conversation that Rep. O'Neill had actually started for us at the end of 2022. We thought strike while the iron is hot. So we invited several speakers to come together, and we did a legislative lunch and learn in the House Anderson building. The speakers that we had on board were from all walks of society. Jay Shauna Hicks works for the state government. John L. Allen Bay has a long list and is a dynamic speaker who spoke at our event. JT Weiss is a good man. He's the CEO of Abcor Industries, and his company hires returning citizens primarily. And if you listen to him and his testimony, he will tell you they're some of the best working, hardest working, dedicated individuals that you can hire, and he wants more of them. Peter O'Rourke at the time was working for the Michigan League for Public Policy. And then Joe Haveman, he actually sits on the board, I think, of Safe and Just. He also works for Hope Network, and he's a great speaker on the topic. So, what the idea was reignite the conversation early on, especially with new legislators as they were coming in, freshmen. We wanted them to be acquainted with Good Time and some of the other topics that were on the table. So we did this thing in February, and that then led to the introduction of the bill in April. um, the bill package introduction occurred. Actually, technically, I think it was enrolled later the next week, April 25th. But on April 20th, we had this great um, rally on the lawn of the Capitol. Several speakers, including the bill sponsors, showed up to speak on this topic. And it was a beautiful day in April. Go figure. Not every day in April can be counted on, but this one was good. And that's when the Good Time bill package was introduced in the House, and I broke it down by who signed which bill exactly. So four lead sponsors, each one took one piece of the legislation: Rachel Hood, Jimmy Wilson, Amos O'Neill, and I cannot remember Rep. Paez's first name. So you can
Veronica.
Veronica. There you go. This is the group of people. You can see there's lots of duplication. Obviously, they all cross-signed each other's bills, and we were thrilled to have it introduced back then. However, as time went on, that was April, and we knew the legislators had a couple of months left to, get something done before they would take a summer recess. So we were hoping that in May or maybe June even, they would get this on the agenda for a hearing in the House Judiciary Committee. But it was disappointing that it never came up. And I think there was maybe some other policies that were introduced, similar big lift criminal justice reform policies that also met with a lot of headwinds. And so it wasn't surprising to me that they didn't go ahead and put our bill up for a discussion in the House Judiciary or House Criminal Justice Committee. Um, so what we did when the summer was over, we thought, let's keep striking on this topic, and we scheduled something for February 28th. It was a coalition of folks from different organizations. We called it the People's Priority Event. And again, we held it for the legislators up in the Mackinac Room. On the left, you see a list of those other coalition members that had different topics to talk about. We talked about the good time policy, of course, but others were there to talk about Second Look, the ombudsman bill from CPR, um, and Safe and Just spoke on the juvenile life topic. And David LeGrand, who was able to get his bill, I think, all the way through and signed into law, is the restoration of the Sentencing Commission. And that's a big deal, but I'm not going to go way into it. But this was the group of leaders that we had speak again to try and keep pushing on the topics and keep it fresh in people's minds. But, as the summer wound down last year, we realized that it was likely that things weren't going to move. And that's when we decided to do the Good Time Ballot Initiative. Now, the ballot initiative is a different way to get the job done. This is a way that the people can speak by signing the petition and demonstrating a level of support that would actually put the good time policy on the ballot in November of 2024 for people to vote on. So that's what we're engaged with in a big way right now. We haven't given up on the legislative approach. As a matter of fact, some could say that this would be a good way to put more pressure on them. Um, we didn't want to take our foot off the pedal, was the whole point here. We wanted to make sure that this topic stayed in the forefront and actually went out more widespread to the public. We've been doing a lot of work in Lansing, but we really wanted to engage the public because we want a well-informed, well-educated voter coming to the polls in November of 2024. If this thing makes it, we want people to understand it and then be able to vote on it properly, I think. But in order to do that, I think I'm going to dive in deep on something that may or may not be helpful for people, but that is the history of truth in sentencing. And this gives you kind of a step back. What is the big picture? What is the time scale? And I think this graphic will help us do that. So I'm going to spend a little bit of time walking through this graphic for you. I think what's interesting to note are the endpoints. If you look to the far right, we are living in the era of truth in sentencing ever since 2000. If you look to the left, what you don't see is 120 years of good time policy on the books. In 1857, 4 years after we built our first prison up in Marquette, the legislators saw fit to have a policy in place to recognize and incentivize good behavior. So the precedent in this case is 120 years plus of a good time policy. So I think it's important to scope it that way and look to the left, look to the right on this picture and realize. But in 1978, the beginning of the end occurred. Um, L. Brooks Patterson did much like what we were trying to do through a ballot proposal. It was called Proposal B. And in 1978, he was able to convince the voters that we needed to eliminate good time for 80 assaultive offenses for those who were serving under one of these 80 crime categories in the assaultive offense category lost their good time in 1978. And that went on for 4 years until 1982 when the legislators themselves realized they had a problem. When this proposal was passed in '78, I think the governor at that time was Milliken. He said it was a bad idea to take this away. I don't know who the MDoc director was, but I remember reading some literature that tells me that that person also thought it was a bad idea to take good time away. And by 4 years later, I guess the legislators agreed. So what they introduced in 1982 is called disciplinary credits. So this is a form of a good time. This is a recognized time off for good behavior type policy, but it was less generous than the original good time. It was straight time with the credits being the same no matter how many years you had been incarcerated. So it was either 5 or 7. I think there was some special disciplinary credits that could get you up to 7 days per month straight line for anybody that was coming in under those 80 assaultive crime categories. But you can see there's an overlap from 82 to 86. We have these two different policies running for those who are serving time in a Michigan prison. Some folks were actually still enjoying the benefits of good time up until 86 if you were in this other category. In 82, you were starting to receive disciplinary credits if you entered the system for one of these 80 assaultive categories crimes. But in 86, they tried to harmonize everything. And then everybody coming in from that point on would be able to earn disciplinary credits. Well, that was great until the era of truth in sentencing. So through the 90s, there was a push to say, look, we want everyone to serve their minimum sentence or some substantial portion of that. And the federal government incentivized many states to start building prisons and keeping people in there until their minimum sentences has been served. Michigan is a standout, and we are the only state that requires one serves 100% of their minimum sentence. No other state does that in the country. The few states that don't have a policy in place for earning credits, at least they only require that someone serves 85% of their minimum sentence before they can come before parole boards and start to talk about release. But since 2000 in Michigan, nobody is receiving, if you entered the system since 2000, you are not going to receive any kind of time off for good behavior. And so I think it's worth looking at this slide, understanding the history of it, and why we got involved and are trying to do what we're doing. So the rationale as we see it for why do we even want to do a good time policy is, well, A, it was the precedent and it was the law of the land for 120 years. But besides that, now that truth in sentencing is in place and it requires 100% of the minimum term be served, there's no way to back out of this as sentence lengths continue to increase, and that can be done through legislative actions, judicial actions. There is no way to undo that. So if somebody gets 10 years, they're going to serve 10 years. And that's what we see as the problem as the sentencing guidelines have just been updated through piecemeal legislation, that has ended up creating this like patchwork approach to the sentencing grid. And as I said, there's no way to unwind this. So Good Time does that. It provides an incentive based corrections management tool for the Michigan Department of Corrections to start identifying, recognizing, and incentivizing those who are serving their time well and they've learned their lessons and they're on their way to self improvement. So that's the rationale for it. Now, why conduct the ballot initiative? Well, we already said that the November 2022 election changed the legislative session. Now we're in the new session, and guess what? The Democrats actually won a majority in 2022 in the House, in the Senate, and they also had the governor's office. So for the first time in 40 years, we're looking at a situation where we all had hope. We all had hope that these kinds of policies would move forward. Um, that didn't happen. They should have been able to move some policies forward. But if we look at the other policies that are sitting out there, juvenile life without parole, second look, even productivity credits, which was is a more narrow scope version of good time credits, even that is stalled. And so that became the rationale for why to do a ballot initiative. And how does one work? How does a ballot initiative work? So this is taken right out of there's a good guide out there that helps you understand how the ballot initiative process works. But basically, it says that we citizens can, by securing signatures on a petition, we can get this question put to the people. Now, many folks have asked about a deadline. And technically, the state has a deadline of May 29th of next year, 20, 2024. By that time, we needed to have collect 356,958 signatures, and those signatures needed to be from within a 180-day window. We started our initiative August 1st. So 180 days later would be February 1st of 2024. We have been telling everybody that is the campaign's deadline. That's a soft deadline. If we see come February 1st that we do not have enough signatures, then the hard deadline that we would all have to focus our eyes on is no May 29th of 2024. The problem is, as I said, you needed to have all these signatures from within a 180-day window. So if we start moving the end post further out in time, we lose those signatures that were collected early in the process. If the volume of signatures continues to increase and we start to see that there's a momentum, it would make sense to say, yes, of course, then we are willing to sacrifice, let's say, 1,000 signatures that we collected in August for 10,000. We're getting 10,000 a week or something like that, whatever the numbers have to be in order to achieve this goal of 356,958. All
I
right. So where
do also want to point out, Jack, that date of May 29th is a very hard deadline, as in we would have to have everybody's physical petitions turned in to the state's office, organized, counted, and sorted on that date at 5 p.m. It is not a date that we could say people are still mailing them in, they're still coming in. We have to physically turn those in. So that is part of our rationale for making sure that we have a deadline ahead of time so that we can make sure we take all those sheets and do everything we need to have the correct number.
Right. And we don't think it would be fair if people are sitting on signature sheets today thinking, well, I may be able to get a few more. The truth is, we couldn't even process 100,000 signatures if you sent them all to us in one day. We need time, and Mariah's point is right. So that's why our deadline is prior to May 29th. All right. So where are we today? Well, I wanted to talk about the number of people that are actually doing the work. Okay. The circulator is the person who signs at the bottom of the petition. And to date, we only have 83 circulators out there. This
Um,
is
Based on what I got in the mailbox yesterday, I think we're closer to 95 or 100. We did have a number of people turn in one or two
wonderful.
sheets. So we got a few people are turning in their individual sheets.
Yes, but I think this number reveals the problem. We can't collect hundreds of thousands of signatures with 80 people, 100 people. We need more people, lots more people. It's the only way this is going to get done. And you've heard the phrase, many hands make light work or easy work or short work, and it's very true. I cannot expect 100 people to collect 1,000 signatures each or 3,000 signatures each, which would be 300,000 signatures. It's just not going to happen, folks. So I'm assuming that the reasons you're on this phone call is because you have an interest in this topic. If you're not helping us collect signatures today, I'd urge you strongly to consider doing that for us. Even if you start by turning in one sheet of 10 signatures and you get those from your friends and your family who know your story, know your situation, and are supportive. What we're really doing, we're asking people not to take a side at this point. That's not what we're doing. What we're asking people to do is help us get this on the ballot so the entire state can vote on it. The entire state can weigh in on this. So you're not saying to somebody, look, I need you to make a decision now. What you're saying is, can you help me get this on the ballot so that we as a people can decide on this topic instead of waiting for our legislators? I got another graphic because I'm an engineer. And this is kind of what the signature ramp rate looks like. We started in the 500 neighborhood and added to that weekly. And so we're somewhere in the neighborhood of 6,400 signatures, 6,450. Mariah has more in her hands, so she can comment on that. But my data is about 2 weeks old.
Yeah, we should be over 7,000 with those sheets that I collected from the post office this week. So
Okay.
we'll definitely have that updated number in the newsletter that goes out on Sunday.
Okay. So by this point, you're probably in a couple of different camps. You're probably sitting there saying, "Man, we have to work harder," and you're starting to get wound up and wanting to do more. Great, that's who I want on the team. If you're sitting there going, this is impossible. I'm just going to walk away from it. I mean, what are you going to do? You're getting depressed. You're getting discouraged. And so, what's the campaign going to do? Well, that's where I want to go next. Um, right now, we've been just reaching a very small audience. And we recently spoke with and are going to start working with, as of this next week, we'll be working with a House of Dank. This is a dispensary chain of stores around the state, and what this does for us is gives us access to a larger audience. It gives us a location where people can come indoors and sign this petition, and it kind of amplifies our efforts because I think as more and more people learn about this and more people sign on, then they're going to also potentially become volunteers who help us collect signatures as well to increase that number from 83 or 100 to 500 to 1,000. So this is a brand new audience for us. I don't know much about the business of marijuana dispensaries, but I'll tell you, the folks there that I have spoken to at headquarters say, look, Jack, this topic resonates with our customers. This is a topic that we can identify with because let's face it, I'm sure some of these folks themselves who have been through the ringer can certainly identify with the need for a good time policy. Um, one of the key spokesmen, and it's not written here, and until we have it nailed down, I can't say too much, but we believe that a figure, his name is White Boy Rick, or Rick Wersch, you might know him as, who spent 27 years in prison for drug related charges, is a strong supporter and will start to advocate for us because he's closely associated with the owners and managers of the House of Dank stores, and he said he would. He's on board. Basically, they're telling us he's on board. So I think maybe what he'll do is start trying to influence this topic. Now, what we're going to do is starting this week on December 8th and 9th, which is next Friday and Saturday, we're going to be located at certain stores, and I put the little banner here on the particular stores that we're going to try and cover with volunteers on either Friday or Saturday. So we're going to announce this. I think Monday we'll have more details on which specific stores, but I've identified them here just simply as, 8 Mile and Fort Street, Grand Rapids, Ipsy, Saginaw. One of my volunteers is sitting out there right now going, "Man, I'll cover this store or that. I just didn't know about it. Please let us know." Because what I'd like to do is let House of Dank know that we can get more coverage. I'd like to see Traverse City, Centerline, these other stores. We'd like to get coverage and have people set up. We have a nice banner and a table that, if you put it on a 6 foot table, the banner covers it just perfectly. Makes a really pretty display. Sorry. And so I would love to see every one of these stores covered. If you're interested and you want to get involved, please give us a call or send me an email or smoke signals or something. Let me know that you guys are on board and wanting to help grow this thing because that's what we're going to need. Um, Another collaboration that I want to talk about. I've been speaking with the folks from Humanity for Prisoners. This is a great organization. They advocate one on one or one at a time for individuals who are incarcerated. It's a good faith-based organization. I really love the hearts of the people that are working there, and I'm working closely with their executive director. And they're going to come alongside of us as we screen this film called Behind Our Walls. This was a documentary done by a former Calvin College student, and we will be airing this for the first time here on this side of the state, January 6th at the Washtenaw Community College. I'll get more details for you on the exact times. But what we want to do is expand our reach and include more and more locations on the east side of the state. As you can see, this is heavily weighted to the west side of the state, and I think Mark told me that our showing would be the first time that this movie gets an audience on the east side of the state. I'm also talking to Northridge Church about trying to get them to do it maybe in January or February. So we're working on trying to increase the audience. The idea here is I think we've saturated the kinds of folks that would easily, quickly, and readily sign this because they already know. It's the criminal justice folks that have been involved either firsthand by going through the system or by advocating for criminal justice reform for years. So that audience is getting saturated. We need to reach a wider audience. These two collaborations I see as helping us tremendously. Excuse me. And then there is a third collaboration that I'm going to announce here. It's a little less well formed at this point, but we're working with a rapper out of Detroit named T Grizzly. His mom just called last night looking for some more petition sheets. He's coming into town, I think, mid December for a concert, and he's going to give us a shout out. And we intend to try and cover that event with some more help. I know some of you have said, "Hey, I'll go to the concert." I'm like, that's great. Collect signatures while you're there, and we should be able to get a table set up. We should be able to get the rap artists to say something from the stage um, for that event. And I've heard some big names are coming, Little Wayne and others. So we'll see where that goes. But the idea here, folks, is to increase the reach. So if you're asking yourself, how are we going to get out of this minimal signature gathering type numbers that we're in? These are the ways that I intend to do that by starting to network with other organizations that can help us. So with that, I might have actually set a record and got through this in less than an hour. I'm going to open this up for Q&A. Mariah, do you want to